How exciting. There are places you haven't been where you already belong. I love that. Hello, Jarrah Marble dwellers. This is Linda from Jarrah Marbles. And today I'm talking a little bit about, if not now, when. You know, we can get really stuck in putting things off and having a better plan and thinking it all through for a couple of years before you actually get to do something where, why don't you give it a go today? But anyway, you know what? Let's have a little listen, a little chatty poo and see what happens. And thanks again for dropping by. With all the known troubles in the world, without naming names, wars, poverty, climate crisis, homelessness, racism, prejudice, and on it goes. I woke up this morning and wondered, how did we ever get so far away from goodness? Yes, I know it's naive, but it's who I am. So that's the big picture. And all of that brought me down to this other thought, how we just leave everything to the future. We can do that when the better weather comes, or when I have this amount of money, or when I get that good job, or when I meet Mrs. Right, Miss Right. If not now, when? I remember a time when we had glory boxes. We had lingerie, good undies, fancy bras, good Sunday best, special dinner sets, bed linen, kept for special times, all packed away for that special occasion. I think there was a time where we didn't really understand living now, like, hey, let's wear those great bras now, or, you know, let's use those beautiful sheets. We lived in a very different era many, many years ago. We had glory boxes, and for those that didn't know what that was, it was, well, some people did have a very large box that was placed at the end of their bed, and you filled it with sheets and blankets and tea towels and all sorts of goodies for when you got married. And so, of course, it was a very different time, and we ended up having 2 kettles, 2 toasters, or presents that people didn't want, and I think that was the beginning of re-gifting. We've probably always done that, but it just started to get a little bit obvious, I guess. Now, if not now, when? The subject of this podcast this week just throws me back in different stages of my life where I was more spontaneous. And maybe I still am, but I tend to think things really through now, whereas there was a time where, you know, if I was invited to do something, off I went and did it. I was in a rock band back in the early 80s called Chrome Lady. My boyfriend of many years was the bass player. I think we were together, you know, something like 6 years, which was a long time given that we started dating when we were 14. It was a fun life and not so fun in places. As I said, we started dating at 14. And when I say dating, I mean a full-blown relationship. Yep, that's exactly right. He was troubled, to say the least. I was 14, no one bothered to check on me, and we were magnetically attracted to each other, really through neglect and circumstance. But we didn't understand any of that, and all the girls fancied him, and he went through all of them, and he would tell me about it and never had anything nice to say about them. He was a really talented musician, and we wrote a lot of music together. I was a singer in the band, and we broke up more times than we were actually together. Now, while he was out, you know, meeting lots of girls, I actually met quite a few guys. At last count, I think it was something like 128, give or take. But in the end, we broke up for good and remained better friends than our frantic juvenile relationship. Ultimately, I went on to do other things, one of which had a principal role in a theatre production called South Pacific, playing Nellie Forbush. Now, there's a name. Eh? And during that time, I had 2 boyfriends, both of whom didn't know about each other. And both wanted me to settle down and get married. I was 20. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I say that like I had some major point, you know, and I was married like a year and a half later to someone that I didn't really know that well anyway. But anyway, not to say that these things don't happen these days, but when I raised my 3 daughters, I had some fairly strong ideas on what wasn't going to happen, and that was one of them. Subsequently, nobody was often married at 20. But I digress. I had two boyfriends, and I ultimately got caught. That was kind of funny. I had gone out to a function with the one boyfriend, and who should be doing the silver service but the other boyfriend? And there was only one way in and one way out. So I went off to the bathroom to try and think about what it was I was going to do, because I was sitting there with one and there was the other one staring. I was like, So when I went to leave, they were both standing at the door, knowing full well that I was going to try and leave and that I would have to walk past both of them, which I did. And they both said that I was going to have to make up my mind. And I did. I dropped them both. You don't corner this girl. You just don't do that. Well, you don't do that to anybody, really. But it was nothing serious, and I was 20, like throw me a bone. Anyway, not long after that show, I left New Zealand and came to Australia, and I met my first husband 2 days later, and I was actually dating the air flight attendant, Trevor, if you're out there, hi, for a few weeks, for a while, until eventually I decided to just only see the guy that I ended up marrying. And the thing was, I never wanted to get married. I wasn't this person that dreamed about it, wasn't interested in it. I never dreamed of having children. It just wasn't a part of who I was. And I mean, which is understandable. By that stage, I was 21. So I can be forgiven for not wanting to, to wed. And of course, come forward another 40 odd years, we very much are in a world where you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You don't have to get married. You do not have to have children. You will not be less for any decision that you decide to make. There's nothing more boring than people trying to shove down people's throats what their lives will be if they don't have kids while they've got their kids driving them crazy. So when I came to Australia on my one-way ticket, I had $40 in my pocket, and I figured that I would work in Australia and then I would go on to Scotland. That was the plan. My folks are Scottish, all my relations that I know of are Scottish, and having been raised without cousins or any other family, it seemed like a great plan to get my butt over there. So meanwhile, met this guy, engaged after 5 months, married 5 months after that, and not long after that, I had an ectopic pregnancy, which suddenly put me on this trajectory of suddenly really wanting to have a baby. I was, and still am, to a degree, a very go-with-the-flow kind of person. But just as quickly, at that point, my life was changing really quickly. Suddenly, I was in an operation room having what needed to be removed for the ectopic pregnancy. And then something like a week later, I was sitting in a bank manager's office telling a manager why it would be a good idea for him to lend me $25,000 for a sandwich bar that I wanted to buy in Newtown, Sydney. Mr. Blainsdale, what a wonderful man. He really, really believed in me, and he said, look, you just keep on visiting me, and if I can see that this is something that you want to do, get your savings, happening, and certainly we will lend you that money. And one day he did. He said, go ahead. And so on opening the first of my 4 shops, I discovered that I was pregnant for the second time. And looking back, I was never scared. I wasn't fazed by what was ahead of me, because again, at that age, you didn't really think very far forward. I mean, obviously 3,000 years later, if this was to happen to me, if it was even possible, I would know exactly what's ahead of me, and I probably would have some concerns. But of course, back then, my memories are they're free and easy. Ignorance really is bliss, isn't it? I mean, it is. I was told not to go into business, that I would fail. Businesses really made it. The percentages weren't great at that stage. It was something like 75% of all businesses, especially in the food area, failed. That businesses really made it. Well, in my mind, I heard nothing, and I just smelt bad breath. Not any of this advice that was being given to me were from people that had ever been in business, and I just knew I was going to open a shop, and that was that. So if not now, when? The freedom I had to do my own artwork, I had could organise my own original decor. So let me just define that. That was all decorated from Vinnie's St Vincent de Paul down the road in King Street, Newtown there, and it just had the most amazing books and interesting vases and all sorts of things. In fact, it was all so lovely that when I sold the business for the first time, one of the arrangements was that they would buy the business with the understanding that all the decor stayed. Oh, that's rubbish. Oh, be quiet, Bob. So it also, I could really unleash my nuttiness. And one of the things I also had was a rare pencil plant. Yes, you heard that right. And all that was a pot with some dirt in it, and I put a pencil in it, and I put it on the counter with a little plastic sign dug into the ground that said rare pencil plant. And people used to think that was funny until one day this lady came in and she said, "Oh, so what month does this rare pencil plant flower?" And I thought she must be joking. And I went, "Well, actually, it's blooming now. See the lead at the top? That's actually the flower." She said, "That's lovely. My mother's a horticulturalist and she's in an elderly facility. I would love to buy her something like this. She loved flowers and I'm sure she's never seen anything like that. Would I be able to buy it?" I said, "Well, not that one, but I could bring one in for you," thinking she was joking, thinking that we were just joking. And she said, "Oh, look, I'll be passing by tomorrow. I'll pick one up." I went, "Okay, then fine," thinking she wasn't joking. So when I got home, I had to grab a HB pencil, stick it in a little pot of dirt, and brought it in. Not sure whether she would come or not, and she did. That'll be $5. Thank you very much, which was, pretty good for 1983. So there were all these little scenarios that they were just wonderful, wonderful fun. I remember this lady walked into the shop one day demanding to speak to the manager. So I walked out of the shop into the kitchen, then came back out and said, "Yes, could I help you?" She had no sense of humour. I can't even remember what it was she wanted. It was so... It obviously wasn't anything important, but the thing that I remember was that she did not appreciate my humour. Now, let me see, I was 22, 23. Yeah, I would have been 22. And, I mean, back in the day, most of us at 22, we looked like we were 12. We just looked like kids. But I think that the thing that really touched me were the people that came in as my regulars. They were just so wonderful. And if anyone thought they were going to give me hell, I was ready to give cheek right back. And it would always end up with the whole shop, the lunch crowd, laughing up a storm. "Oh, so funny, isn't it?" "That's right, Bob. He's just got attitude. Don't worry about him." Life is not measured by the breaths that we take, but by the moments that we take that take our breath away. I love that. And I guess, looking back at different times when I had my very first shop, it never occurred to me that it would fail, even though people tried to tell me that it would. It's so amazing. And I look back at that time sometimes and I close my eyes and remember how completely innocent I was and completely unfazed. And I just thought if I worked hard and I was consistent, that I would fill my till with money and I would do okay. And I did. So many things could have gone wrong and they didn't. But I think that the thing that I think threw some people was that I appeared to be way too young to be possibly running my own business. And I suppose at that age, that was the first time I came across that kind of prejudice where people, mainly older men, just thought there was, that I was inventing, that it was my shop, and that it really wasn't my shop because I was doing all my own artwork. I was creating all my own menus and burgers. I did a lot of vegetarian lines. And back in the early 80s, there wasn't a lot of that. I was doing cauliflower and potato burgers, spinach and pumpkin burgers, curry burgers. I was making all my own sauces and relishes, tomato relish, Thai relish, plum, tomato, and people could have all sorts of different combinations. And I just invented all these different types of foods to see what would work. Well, I made a bit of a rod for my back because they all worked, and it was just home cooking. For me, there was a better profit margin in it, and also it was fresh. Like I knew that people would appreciate fresh food because I certainly did. And I was also very good friends with the local council guy who used to do all sweeping the streets, a guy called Robert. If you're out there, Robert, hello. And he was just such a beautiful soul, and was always around the shop and always pop in and say hello and grab something to eat, and always said, if you ever need a hand, if you ever need anything lifted or moved or light bulb change, I'm there. And on a couple of occasions, a couple of things did happen, and I literally would go out onto Missenden Road there, which is around the corner from King Street, Newtown here in Sydney, and just scream at the top of my lungs, Robert! And he would come. Oh, he would not. Yes, he would, Bob. Stop it. So there were lots of smiles, laughter, and I was so glad that I didn't hold myself back and wait on when. Like, oh, well, when I'm older, this will probably be a better time to do it. But I actually sold that business, and a few months later was offered it back by the owners because they just weren't doing well. And so I did. I was able to buy it back, and I really enjoyed doing it. It was satisfying, and I love my customers. As Abraham Lincoln said, most people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. And isn't that the truth? I look back on those years with a lot of warmth and fondness. It was a truly special time where people were really kind and accepting of me. And it stood out because I knew no one, and I just put up my head. I just put my head down. I just put up my head. I just put my head down and pulled out every creative idea that was downloaded into my brain. Because suddenly I was having to do all my own signage. I was doing my own blackboard art. It never occurred to me that I should contact someone and get them to do it for me, that I would just do it. I figured if people could read it, then it would work. And then I would be able to put any little quirky thought that passed through my mind. Oh, and there's plenty of quirky thoughts, aren't there? Oh, be quiet, Bob. And so I became a foodie, a self-taught cook, and a bottle washer. I used to get my sister to ring me at the shop repeatedly over the morning tea time and also the lunch time, just to give an air of urgency. So I'd be serving, the phone would ring, and then I'd go, Linda, sandwich bar. Oh, yes, I'll just get a pen, won't be a moment. And I would just pretend that I was writing down an order, thank them very much, tell them it would be ready in 15. Then she would ring back straight away. In the end, I couldn't answer the phone because I really had real customers, so I'd have to pick up the phone. Linda, sandwich bar, could you stop ringing? Stop it, Bob. So it was actually a lot of fun, and I invented different things like cooked this asparagus and cheese meatloaf, which I worked out I could cook in a microwave. And I mean, why you might think, oh, that's no biggie, and it probably isn't. But I just felt that I was at a stage in my life where I felt that I could give anything a go, and that the worst thing that will happen is nothing would happen, but at least I would give it a go, which is kind of how I feel about doing this podcast. This was actually a lot more organising than the sandwich bar ever was, because I really did not know how to do anything, and I didn't know what was actually involved behind the scenes. But the deeper I got, it was like, you know what I compare it to? Compare it to renovations. You get to a point where you've just got a huge mess around you, and you can't go backwards. You can't. It's just a big, gigantic mess, and you don't know where to begin, what to clean up first. And I felt like that's where I got with when I was teaching myself how to work the software and what I was going to talk about, et cetera, and you sort of think, oh yeah, that's all, it's easy, I can do that. Yeah, it's been a really good challenge, and I'm really glad that I'm doing it. And also I'm coming at it, I recognise, from the same place that I was coming at when I went into business for the very first time. Was I just thought, I just really want to give this a go, and it'll be great if I make some friends out of it. And that's about as far as I sort of went with it, and everything else that came with it, that and 100 other stories. It really, how would you say, it shaped me. I didn't understand that my personality was an asset, as all of our personalities are, that the way that I was with people, I was just being myself. And I remember someone actually walking into the shop one day and just going, oh, you won't always be this friendly. And I just said, yes, I will, because she couldn't accept or believe that who I was actually who I was. And it was who I was and is who I am. I can't believe I actually managed to get that out so succinctly. Oh, I blew it. I was going to say succinctly. Should have just said clearly and left it at that. Oh, bollocks. Oh, stop it, Bob. He's just got such an attitude. Fair dinkum. Those were really, really good memories, and it was really nice to talk about it. I hope that you could relate to it in some way, and especially if you've got plans on doing something for yourself. I really am all about, if not now, when. Sometimes we can overthink things and make things far more complicated, and really what we're doing is just making excuses when we could actually go out there and give it a go. And some things, there is a little bit of homework to do, there is a little bit of teaching of and finding out, what you have to do, what's absolutely important, which is really, really, that in itself is really important, because a lot of the research that I did in relation to setting up this podcast, for example, would be enough to put off anybody, and some of the information was not correct, and sometimes vital parts were missed out. But again, I did enough research, and in the end I went, well, that's not right. That's not right. Shush, Bob, down boy. So when I started my day at the cafe, which I called Linda's Sandwich Bar, it really was all about slaying your day. I'd get in there, turn on the lights, and I would lift out. It was like a red telephone on a frame that you carried out, and you put it out in front of your shop, and people could put, I think it was 20 cents or 50 cents, I can't remember, and you could make it was a dial phone. People could make phone calls, and the shop was directly across the road from a hotel called the Marlborough Hotel, and back in the day, people were forever being taken away in ambulances, people that had one too many. It was quite a different kind of setup, whereas now it's where, a lot of bands play. They used to have like an amazing Italian restaurant. I haven't been in that part of the world for so long, so I could be completely wrong about, that. But I think that it's really important to have something that challenges you, because if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And I think you've got to really think about, do the universe a favour and don't hide your magic. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with society. Don't let it trick you in relation to anybody or the general idea of that, if you want to go into business or you want to try something out, you don't have to put all your savings into something. For me, even when I started my very first business, everything I got, most of what I got was from secondhand stores, and I was able to present the shop. The shop was clean. It didn't matter. I didn't have, the shop itself was $25,000, and I had to then go into business and had to buy stock. So I was just buying what I needed just to get through till I could make some more money to then buy more stock, etc., and ask my customers questions like, do you know how to cook X? And there were a couple of people that were very, very helpful. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you have a plan or an idea, really consider going ahead and doing it. If it's going to cost you, your whole life savings, I mean, depending on what they are, because there are a lot of things out there that are not, I don't know, you've got to pay a whole lot of money and then you're still on a big maybe. In my case with the cafe, it was solid. It was there, and it really was up to me to make it work. And I think there are just so many different things, so many different areas that people can really succeed, and things that they can do well. And when you start doing things like that, you start developing other areas of your life, and you actually make discoveries about yourself. So I guess, you've heard sayings like, eat the cake, have that extra slice of cake. Well, I say eat the bloody cake because it's somebody's birthday somewhere. Oh, you're so funny. Oh, shut up, Bob. Finding the joy in what you do is so important. I know that I'm happiest and joyous when I'm enthusiastic about what I'm doing. And I think that I do this thing called what I want. And I can't stress enough how important that is. I have had times in my life when I have done exactly what I've wanted, and then there's been times when I've just held myself back. When I look back on those times, there have been real reasons, other people, other situations that just required my attention, which sometimes boils down to you require attention. You really need to look at what it is you want to do, because we can really get bogged down by other people's problems or other people's viewpoints. And the other thing I started doing, so I'm just going to flip through all these different subjects, just that's how my brain works, that I started making cakes and muffins, and people would order cakes before they were going on camping trips, and I would go and bake a cake. Never baked cake in my life. Not very many anyway. And so I started selling cakes and muffins. And do you know, cupcakes are muffins that believed in miracles. I know. Anyway, you know what? I don't trust words. I trust vibes. People can tell you anything, but a vibe tells you everything. Learning lessons. You know when you're in a situation when someone just isn't telling you the whole truth. You feel that vibe, right? When you inwardly, at the least, acknowledge to yourself that that is a, if not now, when, moment too. So, looking back from my vantage point of being 60, I look at my young self who just had courage and tenacity, and I discovered myself as I opened my first sandwich bar solo. Looking back, I'm saying, I'm just so proud of myself. It's so important to acknowledge your achievements, not waiting on anybody else, but just being damn proud of you. Which brings me to this moment of farewell. Fare thee well, Jara Marble dwellers. It's been an honour and a pleasure again. Thank you so much if you made it to this stage of the podcast. Say g'day to the family for me, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.